The Lord blessed the latter part of Job's life more than the first. He had 14,000 sheep, 6,000 camels, 1,000 yoke of oxen, 1,000 donkeys. What's that mean? It means he was wealthy. That man was well off. God is not anti-wealth. Number two, that statement, money is the root of all evil, is not in the Bible. Money is not the root of all evil. Money is not evil. Money is neutral. 1 Timothy 6:10, it's the love of money. It's my attitude toward money that determines whether or not it creates evil outcomes in my life. It's not money itself. And I enjoy listening to other preachers. Back in the day, I used to have a lot of cassette tapes. I don't know what to do with all of them now, but I used to love to hear Wendell Winkler. And I think it was a series he was doing on the Psalms. But he said sometimes we see a guy, he's got a lot of money, and somebody goes, you can't have all that money and be altogether right. And he said, that's not right. And I think even in ministry sometimes, we work in different places, different size churches that have different ability to provide for the minister that they support. And sometimes we look at a guy that may be doing better than us in ministry and say, that guy doesn't teach the truth. Now, folks, that's not right. That's not fair and it's not right. And here's what he said in that lesson. It just always stuck with me. If a man earns it honestly, spends it wisely, saves it carefully, and gives it generously, there is nothing wrong with money. Money is not the root of all evil. My attitude towards money, that can be the problem. And if I love money, and I'll do anything to get it, even underhanded things to get it, I don't think, I always like to start with the understanding that I'm preaching to good people. I don't know why you'd be here on a Tuesday afternoon if the kingdom wasn't first in your life. I'm not preaching to a bunch of hirelings. I'm not preaching to people that are preaching to see how much money they can get out of it. And I don't think there's anybody here today that if their elders said, hey, don't bring up this sensitive topic if you want to get paid. I think you'd probably go home and say, honey, we got to pack up because on Sunday that's what I'm preaching. I mean, I don't think I'm preaching to the kind of people that are in it just for the money. Okay? God is not anti-wealth. This idea that money is the root of all, money is not the root of all evil, and I hope you'll really hear this. You're worth it. You're worth it. What you're doing is worth what you're getting. Now, here's the passage, two verses. Again, all of you probably could beat me to these chapters and verses, but I want you to hear it. It's 1 Timothy 5, 17 and 18. Let the elders who rule well be counted worthy of double honor, especially those who labor in the word and doctrine. For Scripture says, you shall not muzzle an ox while it treads out the grain. And the laborer, the worker, is worthy of his wages. I think preachers really struggle sometimes. And there are a lot of jokes at our expense. I don't think people really understand. Somebody, it was maybe Dale, talked about comedians like to talk about, to other comedians because they can relate to one another. Well, when preachers get together, I don't know that anybody else understands what we're doing like another preacher. This kid came and worked with us for the summer. He was an intern, and he preached a couple of sermons one Sunday and went to a funeral on Friday. He said, I was worn out. I just laughed right at him. I thought that was hilarious. Buddy, you got to go to work on Monday. What are you talking about? But it's hard work. This is 1 Corinthians 9, 4 through 12. Do we have no right to eat and drink? Do we have no right to take along a believing wife, as do also the other apostles and the brothers of the Lord and Cephas? Or is it only Barnabas and I who have no right to refrain from working? Whoever goes to war at his own expense? Who plants a vineyard and does not eat its fruit? Or who tends a flock and does not drink of the milk of the flock? Do I say these things as a mere man, or does the law say the same also? Does not the law say the same also? For it's written in the law of Moses, you shall not muzzle an ox while it treads out the grain. I love this. Is it oxen that God is concerned about? Or does he say it all together for our sakes? For our sakes, no doubt. This is written that he who plows should plow in hope, and he who threshes in hope should be a partaker of his hope. If we've sown spiritual things for you, is it a great thing if we reap your material things? If others are partakers of this right over you, are we not even more? I thought I was going to be able to do this sitting down. Listen, there are people who are looking to get paid for doing the least amount of work possible, and some of them have found their way into ministry. And folks, no matter what you pay a guy like that, it's too much. It's too much. There are guys that the kingdom is at the heart of everything. They eat kingdom business. They drink kingdom business. The very breath they breathe is kingdom business. When they go to bed at night, they dream big dreams for the kingdom. You can't pay a guy like that too much. Because everything you give him, he's going to invest it right back into the kingdom. The worker, and I just underlined some of these words. I was sitting back here listening to others preach, but listen, labor, war, plant, tend, plow, thresh, sow. We're warring a good warfare. We're soldiers of Christ. We're fighting, we're battling, we're planting, we're tending, we're sowing, we're threshing, we're working. I'd be in trouble if you gave me both, the things we don't talk about, the preacher and his money and the preacher and his health, because you got to take some time off. But sometimes there's no time to take time off. I remember when I interviewed for the job that I've had now for nearly 19 years, one of the elders asked me, do you have any hobbies? You're looking at my hobby right now. I used to love basketball. I work for a church that's got a gym. That would have been my dream when I was about 18. I'd have been thrilled to death. I'm preaching to people. If you've heard the sermons you've heard this week, those guys labored in the Word. And they've labored in prayer before they got up to preach. If you do everything that Jeff and Dale said we ought to be doing this week, you're going to work hard. And I know people love us. I know they love us. This joke that you only work on Sunday, that's not very funny to me. Because I know guys that they don't have really the time they need to rest their bodies and to rest their minds. They're working. And the worker is worthy of his wages. So I hope that's biblical enough. I mean, we want to have a conversation about money. It has to be biblical. It has to be practical. Let me say this. I've never told anybody that I'm an expert on this subject. I'm happy to talk about it as much as I understand it. And so I'm trying to be practical from my own experience. And this idea of ask for what you need. I know this is out of context. You have not because you ask not, but I do think it applies. I do think sometimes that we don't have all that we need because we don't always ask for what we need. Can I say a caveat on this? This should happen up front. What I mean by that is when you go to interview for a job and you start, it gets to the point where we're talking about you're going to be hired and here's the support. You ought to make it known at that point what you need. You ought to have the important conversations about support and what it's going to take to take care of your family up front. Had a couple of conversations really within the last, I guess I've hit an age, where younger guys are asking me questions. I used to ask guys older than me. So, but one of them, he's about to accept a position. And he said, they're going to give me $51,000. Now, to those of you who don't know this, that's not a salary with all the benefits. Salary's $51,000 and then he's going to, no. His insurance is going to come out of that. We'll get to that, but because sometimes people hear that number and they think it's really, some of these numbers are high numbers, but they don't know how much is coming out of it. I just asked him a simple question. He was going that Sunday to kind of meet with the elders. They were going to finalize everything. I said, what do you need? He said, well, we'd go for 51. We really need. He said, we looked at it. We really need 55. I said, well, you need to ask for what you need. And when he came back the next week and we talked about it, I said, how did he go? He said, they gave me 55. And they didn't even flinch. I didn't ask him, what do you want? I wanted to know, what's it going to take for you to be able to pay for the things. He's got a young wife and a beautiful newborn. And he's got some financial obligations that he's got to meet. What do you need? And they didn't have any trouble bringing that up $4,000 to what he needs. Young couple, and I want to be as vague as possible because I don't, this is people's private business, and I did ask him if I could share it, but this couple had lunch with me and my wife, and he was thinking about selling insurance. He is a talented minister. He's committed, he's gifted, he's a really good student, he's a good communicator, and I don't think we need another preacher selling insurance. That's my opinion. And I said, listen, don't do that. Don't do that. Do your elders know where you're at financially? He was making $69,000 a year. He did his homework. He talked to other ministers in the area, people his age, with his training, his years of experience, with comparable, congregation comparable to his. He went and made the presentation to the elders. They raised his salary from 69 to 85. And they promised him a 2 to 3% increase each year in the years to come. Do you know why he got that? Because he asked for it. And they weren't mad at him. They weren't ashamed of him. I think I'm proud. And I think I've been proud of the fact over the years that I've never asked for anything. They gave it to me and I took it, and I don't think that's always been fair to my wife. I don't think that's always been fair to my kids, and we'll talk a little bit about that here in a second. But one thing that happened is, and it had to do with insurance. I got to talking to my wife, and she said, you have to go talk to the elders. I went to one of the men of the congregation. He's a very successful businessman, and I asked for his advice. And he gave it to me in a way that only he could, and it wasn't necessarily the way I wanted it. He did ask me, who's the man at your house, which hurt just a little bit, I got to be honest. And he kind of said, Tim, I've got employees. If they're doing a great job and they come to me and say, hey, I've earned it. I respect that. And I remember when I went to the elders, I was so embarrassed, and I'm a little embarrassed to tell you, I kind of got emotional about it because I didn't want to ask. But they said yes. I always feel like I've been with churches and elders that love me and care about me. They minister to me and to my family. But how are they supposed to know if I don't express it? I talked to Jeff on the way, in preparation for the Jenkins Institute. If you want to go to their website, Ministers Salary Survey. You go up to their resources and you'll find this. I had a hard time buying it because it was free. So you don't even have to pay anything. What you'll see there is kind of an average of what ministers make based on education, experience, and size of the congregation. That may be helpful. I recommend you look at it. Here are a few things that when I say ask for what you need, do it up front. Find out about insurance. Who's providing it? There are some churches that do, but most ministers are self-employed and they pay for their own insurance. Ask about retirement. Not every church does. A lot of churches do. We have a 3% match. They take that out of my, they pay us every 2 weeks. They remove that from my paycheck, and then they match it. They've been doing that for 20 years. I don't think that's unreasonable to ask them to consider retirement. Number 3 is, and I don't know of anybody that does this, I know our congregation does, is a longevity bonus. It's why I'll never leave. Kidding, I love it there. But there's this sense in which they want to honor years of service. I think longevity is good for me, but I also think it's good for them. We know each other. And we've been through some things together. And so if you want to honor that, that's something to be considered. Paid time off. It should be discussed. You should go in knowing. And I think 2 weeks of paid vacation is standard. 2 weeks. That's good. Now, a lot of preachers will get 2 weeks where they still get their support from their home congregation, but they can go and they can do a gospel meeting or they can do a seminar. If I'm gone and it's not on a Sunday, I get to be here Monday and Tuesday, they'll let me go and that they don't detract anything from my support at home. But I get 2 weeks vacation, 2 weeks to travel, and then it's not unusual for professional development. Some of you are here for the week. You preach or minister in the congregation, and they let you be away to Focal Point. In fact, they may give you something like I think I get 2 of those. Each one is for $200. I've got to preach on Sunday and then leave. They want me there Sunday, but then I'm allowed to take off Sunday night and go to a lectureship, a seminar. And for both of those, they give me the time away, and they give me about $200 to help gas and meals and housing. So ask for what you need. Can I say this I really honor elders. I love elders. I've never had any trouble working with anybody. I'm not looking to be bossing anybody or in charge of anybody. I'm pretty good at doing what I'm told. I don't have trouble getting along with people. And I don't want this to sound disrespectful, but elders, if you could get as educated as possible, and if it's possible, don't make them ask. Right. If you can figure out what's really needed, what the going rate sounds so ungodly, I just don't like it, but what's needed to take care of the family, do your best. I think it's not very nice to know you got the guy at a discount. Oh boy, we got a deal on him and he doesn't even know it, That I don't know about that. That doesn't feel brotherly to me, Don't be a martyr. I might have been 2 years in, and these people were all my friends, by the way. I'm not mad at anybody. I wasn't mad at the time. But the elder came to me, and I was the preacher, I was the youth minister, I was the secretary. Nobody else was there. I counseled people, I did Bible studies. When our firstborn was six weeks old, we flew 20 kids to Pennsylvania for a mission trip, VBS. I'm telling you, we worked hard, right? And he sat me down and said, well, we want to have a campaign, and it's going to be pretty expensive, and so we can't afford to give you a raise next year. I wasn't this smart then, but 27 years later, I'm like, the poorest guy in the church paid for the campaign. The math doesn't add up on that somehow for me. I'm like, wait, that wasn't fair. That really wasn't fair. But I'll be honest about that, and this is true. At the time, I thought it was noble. I thought that was the noble thing to do, was to sacrifice for the ministry, and especially because it was an evangelistic campaign, and we were trying to reach our community. It's possible, I'm trying to really think how to say this. It's possible to understand your worth and your value without being egotistical. It's okay to understand that you're doing a good work, you're doing God's work, and you should be supported for that. So ask for what you need. Don't be a martyr. Be content with what you have. I don't see the deal that says how much time. When do I? Hey, just tell me when I stop, and I'll stop on time. But on this, obviously, when Paul tells Timothy, godliness with contentment is great gain. We brought nothing into the world. We can carry nothing out. But I want to tell you the application of this. Sometimes you'll see other people your age doing what you're doing that can afford things you can't afford. And there was a time where we couldn't eat at certain restaurants. We couldn't afford to do it. And there were times that we couldn't go on a Disney vacation, And my wife, we'd have a conversation, and she said, we're the ones that decided to be a ministry family. We're the ones that decided to be a single income family. We're the ones that decided, and I'm not saying anybody has to make the choices we made, but it worked for our family. We decided to be a homeschool family. We made these choices. And there are things about those choices that we really value. And so we need to be content. That we're not going to be like everybody else. We're not going to be able to do what everybody else can do. We need to be content with the choices that we've made for ourselves and for our family. Can I warn you, too much exposure to social media makes this point really difficult. And you've heard this before, but comparing your day-to-day life with somebody else's highlight reel will make you miserable. You know, I'm not saying this happened recently, but there was, at one time in 26 years of marriage, my wife and I had a fight. Do you believe that? I didn't put it on Facebook. You know what I'm saying? That's not what we do. We put our highlights. We put our big moments. And if we're not careful, I think there's a lot of things about social media that can be really... There are a lot of preachers here that I've known of that I'm just getting to meet this week, that I'm so happy that I'm getting to meet. And I've known them. They're my Facebook friends. But to actually be with them, and that's good. But these unfair comparisons, you got to be really careful about that. Be content with what you have. So my wife got into Dave Ramsey. And we've taught our children to love everybody, but there were times they hated Dave Ramsey. I'm just going to tell you. That's true. She loved him so much, her sister gave her a trip to Nashville so she could watch a live taping of one of his shows, and she got a picture with him. He says, a budget is telling your money where to go instead of wondering where it went. That's a Dave Ramsey. Now, he may have gotten it from somebody else, but I got it from him. I think it's really important for us to be disciplined people. The lesson just before this, right? I think men struggle with ego, they struggle with sex, they struggle with money. And if we're going to serve God, we've got to practice discipline in all of those areas. And in this area, we have to have discipline. We have to practice self-control. And there are things that we have to sometimes say, that's not in the budget. And that's not always popular, but it's important. I remember Robert Oglesby at Waterview is one of my mentors. I did an internship with him, and he had a couple, they were having all kinds of trouble, and they came in and they visited with him. He said, well, I know the problem. The problem is you're bankrupt. It scared him to death. They said, what do you mean? He said, you're spending more every week than what you make. You're broke, Don't do that. You need to be careful and be a good example. You've got to be careful about how you handle money. When I say practice good stewardship, we could apply that in a lot of different areas, but I want you to think about tax benefits. And I'm not an expert, but even if this gets you to do your own research, find a tax professional that understands ministry finances and ministry taxes, because you have this opportunity on a housing allowance to claim all of the expenses, your mortgage and whatever it costs to heat or cool, your electric bill, your water bill, all of this. You add it all up. You write up a little summary of that at the end of the year. I hand it into my elders. Tim Lewis, the address, is going to spend this much per week in 2023. They read it into the minutes. I hand it in at the end of the year. And if you add up all of those expenses, you don't pay taxes on that amount of your support. I think that's good stewardship. With regard to health, medical expenses, an FSA or an HSA, and just if you don't understand how those things work, find out how they work. That money's set aside. When you need it for a medical expense, you have access to it. The thing that makes it helpful is you're not paying income on that amount. I don't ever remember a year we didn't use it. We got 3 kids. I mean, we're all, here's the funny thing. I had a tooth that was killing me. It was absolutely making me miserable. And my wife said, we can't afford to do anything about that. It was killing me. I was coming back from a meeting. She said the dog is sick and needs a $600. You know that dog got a $600 surgery, and I just sucked on that sore tooth. She's not going to watch this, I hope, because she doesn't like that joke, but that happened. I'm not ashamed to ask for a receipt. I take somebody out to eat, I'm getting a receipt. I buy books, I'm going to get a receipt. I spend something for the office, it's going to be ministry related, I'm getting a receipt. I'm going to keep mileage. Well, I tell them, how much is that? Well, add it up. Add it up over all the years you're in ministry. It's worth taking the time to do it and saving the money and being a good steward. I don't know if anybody here is considered an employee of the church. I've never been considered an employee of the church. I'm self-employed. We pay our taxes quarterly. You better figure that out before the first quarter shows up and you didn't save anything. You've got to be saving up your payments for taxes. And so learn as much about that and talk to older ministers. I've been very fortunate in my life to always be surrounded by older, godly ministry couples who have invested in me, and just listen to them and learn from them and take good advice. On the pay your debts, I want to do two things with this. One is from Proverbs 22 and verse 7, the rich rule over the poor, the borrower is a servant to the lender. Proverbs 6:5, free yourself like a gazelle from the hand of the hunter, like a bird from the snare of a fowler. This sense of free yourself from debt. Don't be enslaved by debt, right? And so there's this idea of a kind of the snowball. You take your debts from the smallest to the highest, aggressively pay off the smallest debt, and then take whatever that payment was and roll it into the next lowest debt and pay that one off, and then roll it, and it should have this. And if we'll do that, it does work, if we'll be disciplined. I want to say that, but I also want to say this. If you borrow money and you don't pay it back, there's a word for that. You're stealing. And not only does that ruin your credibility, it ruins the reputation of the church. I've heard about preachers that borrowed money and then they rolled right out of town, and I don't know how you do that. I don't know. That bothers me. I want to pay my debts. I don't want the knowledge of I took that guy's money and I never gave it back. This is a sensitive subject. When I started in ministry, we lived in a very comfortable home. It was right next door to the church building. I marveled that my wife could be late on a Sunday morning. I said, honey, we live there. She goes, I know, but because we live there, I always think, I got time, but that was considered part of our salary. It was considered, that $450, I think it was $450 a month. When I was 25, I think my starting pay was somewhere around $24,000 or $25,000. And that house was $450 a month. And so, you start thinking about when we left, we moved out of that house. We stayed there 8 years. I love that church. Can I just stop a quick time out? I wouldn't have left any place I've ever been for money. And for whatever they paid me, whether they didn't pay me enough or they paid me, too much. The pay of knowing the people I've known. I mean, I don't have any regret. So I think that's one of the things we worry about when we talk about money. Don't misunderstand any of that. What a terrible loss to me if I hadn't met the people I've met in this ministry. So I'm not mad at anybody, but I'm just saying, at the end of 4 years of living in their house, $21,600 was considered pay, but I walked away empty-handed. We are helping to pay for property the church owns. For some churches, it's the best way that they can afford to have a preacher. I'm just saying, know that when you go in. and understand that. But I really believe it's important for you to start building equity. The homes that we have owned, when we sold them, not only did we get the money out of the house that we put into the house, on every house we sold it for more than we bought it for. We made some money on each house we sold. And that's going to help you later. There's going to come a point for some of us where we can't do this anymore. And so I guess that's the next point. Can I tell you what's hard about that point? It is the demands, the financial demands of right now. You got a lot of nerve, save, retirement. Do you know what my bills look like? Yeah, I do, because I've lived this life for a long time, and I get it. But you've got to put some money away. Here's what somehow, this was, so in 1996, I was doing this internship in Texas, and the preacher there said, Tim, there are a lot of people that were told to opt out of Social Security. And what they were told to do is opt out of Social Security, and then whatever you would have paid Social Security, put it away. Don't touch it. Put it away. Well, what do you think they did with that money? They spent it. And now when they get too old or too sick to keep working in ministry, they don't have Social Security, and they don't have any savings. This, of course, maybe just go home and read the Proverbs. I mean, honestly, that in itself will help you. But this proverb, dishonest money dwindles away, but whoever gathers money little by little makes it grow. And if you'll just be careful to save a little bit from each paycheck, you'll be surprised how much it can grow. This has to do with the fact that you're in a position of trust. When I say protect yourself, you're going to be trusted with church finances. And I want to be transparent. Let me just say this. We have something similar to this in Oklahoma City called Affirming the Faith. And what we do, there's 25 churches. It's not just our congregation, but 25 churches all work together. We get money from all those churches. After the seminar, we tell them how much money came in, how that money was used, and how much is left over. And I think we ought to do that in any area and be as accountable as possible. I hate it when somebody hands me cash, because it's really hard to trace that. I've been, we don't pass the trays. We're still not passing the trays. There's a little slit in the welcome table, and I stand out there and welcome people. A couple times I went, let's just take out the middleman. And I thought, that's a bad joke. Don't tell that joke. That's not good. I shouldn't have told that. But do that. Try to protect yourself when you're dealing with church finances. When I say be creative, there was a point because we were considered self-employed. Insurance is more expensive because you don't have a big number of people behind you. You're on your own. And I think the premium was like $1,000 a month. It was expensive. And I had some pre-existing conditions. My son was born there was something with his kidney where it was kind of, the fluids were getting, you don't need a health. Anyway, he had a pre-existing condition. It was like a $5,000 deductible. We were spending like $17,000, $20,000 of our support on insurance. It was killing us. We weren't being, irresponsible. Our debts were medical debts. My wife, our 3 kids, there were 3, C-sections. That's a major surgery. We had debt. And it wasn't because we were careless. It was medical debt, right? Well, she looked into it, and some of you probably know about share programs. She found Samaritan Ministries. And Samaritan Ministries, they're not trying to make money. They're trying to help religious people help one another. We share the expense. I was so nervous about that. It's like, what if there's a real big bill? Well, I had this big surgery. I had a kidney stone. I don't know why I laughed. It wasn't funny at all. I laughed a little bit because some of my really good friends said, this too shall pass. We should pray. I mean, they're jerks. There's a Greek word for that. Jerk. That was expensive. It was amazing. The checks just started coming to our mailbox. And every month we would send 3 checks. They designated them out. It was way less than our premium and our deductibles. Be creative. This is creative. I just heard this last week. I'm not saying every church should do this, but I think it's creative. Young couple starting a new ministry, and the elder said, if you take this job, we're going to give you a $10,000 loan as a down payment on a house. Every year that you stay with this church, we're going to subtract $1,000 from what you have to pay back. So if you stay 10 years, that loan is a gift. In some ways, I mean, they're earning it, but that's creative. Be creative. This is from Howard Norton. He was one of my professors at Oklahoma Christian. We all help each other in the church. When there are emergencies, we all help each other. And I'm not saying that the preacher should be exempt from that. If your preacher's going through a major health crisis and financially struggling and you want it, that's great. What I'm saying is, if I'm financially irresponsible and I get myself into a mess, what he said was, you think a mechanic's, he just goes to the boss and says, can you bail me out? You think a salesman does that? Why does a preacher think he has a right to expect the church to bail him out of the mess he got himself into? Now that may sound a little too harsh, but I think it's right. We shouldn't keep going back over and over again asking the church to bail us out when we're the ones that are not making good financial decisions. I don't want to be known as a person who is always grumbling about money. I told and I love this guy, but old retired preacher, what are you preaching when you get there? I told him, the preacher and his money. Well, I never had much money to preach about money. There are guys like that. And by the way, some of the people my age and younger, we don't know what some of the older preachers went through. Some of the reason that churches are treating preachers so well is because some of those older guys really educated, and they went through some real lean years where they suffered financially for their ministry. So let's be careful about some of that. I added this today. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge Him. He'll make your ways straight. But trust God. Here's what I mean by that. I'm just amazed by this. There have been times in our life where we thought, I don't know what we're going to do. I don't know how we're going to, there's these bills and we don't have it. And I'm not saying I can't guarantee that this will happen, but I'm telling you it's happened in my life out of unexpected places. Whether it was a meeting I was invited to, I remember I went to a meeting in California and I'd done 3 meetings and never been paid that. I couldn't believe it. I tried to give it back. This ain't right. I'm an idiot. I was like, wait, that can't be right. He goes, yeah, it's right. What's wrong with you? I don't know. Ask my wife. But I thought there had to be a mistake. I'd never been paid that much to do a meeting before. No, that's for you. And that came, it couldn't have come at a more perfect time. If God's not in that, I don't know how to explain that. As a Christian, chalking that up to coincidence doesn't sound right to me. I don't think there's a person sitting in front of me today that went into ministry to get rich. I think you're working for that. I think the sacrifices that you're making and the work that you do, and it's I get lonely sometimes. Study is a lonely business. And there are a lot of times I'm at the office and nobody else is around. I played a lot of sports, and that idea of leaving it all on the court. Nobody looked at me and said natural talent, but boy, I tried hard. Do you understand what I'm saying, right? And I feel that way about ministry. I'm trying hard, and I think you are. Can you imagine? Not just to hear him say, well done, but to hear him say that to people you worked with. I don't know how that's going to work. I don't know, and I'm not trying to be overly dramatic, but can you imagine the people that you visited and you never gave up on, and you carried the gospel to them, and you walked with them, and you counseled them, and you loved them, and you served them, and he's going to say it to you, but he's going to say it to them. And there isn't a dollar amount you can attach to that. I should stop there, and that says I should stop, but I want to say one more thing. There are a lot of people, the church has hurt their kids. They've hurt the preacher, they've hurt the preacher's wife, they've hurt the preacher's kids. I'm not one of those guys. How do I describe the value of all the people who have loved me anyway? I know what I am. I'm pretty aware of me. Here in a little bit, you're done with me. I'm going with me the rest of the day. Does that make sense? I live with me. And they love me anyway. And they've loved my wife. They've been the biggest cheerleaders for my children. And my kids, I believe to a great degree, they're the people they are right now because of churches like this one. I remember one night I came in and one of my co-workers was preaching and somebody said, "What are you doing here?" I said, "I don't know, bro, but I'm a member of this church too." I don't know if you knew that or not. And they've ministered and shepherded my soul. There's been a lot of crisis over the years. And a lot of that's personal and it's private. But they walked with us through all of it. I don't know where that shows up on the bottom line, but it's pretty valuable to me. And so I hope there's some things there biblically and practically that help you with the preacher and his money.